Do you want to die today? That was the question Jessica Buchanan heard every day for 3 months. Kidnapped by AK-47 wielding Somali pirates, Jessica and her fellow aid worker Paul Hagen Thisted endured a living nightmare, wondering if each minute would be their last. She didn't know it yet, but the countdown to rescue had begun. There was no warning, just a burst of gunfire and the thud of a pirate's body hitting the dirt. This is the true story of how U.S. Navy SEALs executed a daring nighttime rescue to bring Jessica Buchanan home. The 4x4 kicked up a small cloud of dust as it sped down the 2-lane paved road. It was rough, but beat the typical unpaved roads that made up most of the country. Dust billowed everywhere, covering every surface, choking you when the wind picked up. In the back of the car, Jessica Buchanan and Paul Hagen Thisted are being driven to special training 480 miles away from the capital of Somaliland. Both work for an NGO dedicated to helping teach children how to avoid landmines and unexpected munitions found all across war-torn Somalia. Their work saves lives, literally. Since the NGO began operations, they've made an impact on the staggering number of children killed or maimed by leftover explosives. But the danger is still very real. In one incident in 2023, a single unexploded mortar shell was disturbed, killing 27 children. Jessica loves her work and her life in Africa. Despite the poverty, or perhaps because of it, there's a vibrancy to the people that she doesn't find in Western living. A real joy in simple everyday things that's comforting to the 32-year-old Ohio native. Despite fears from friends and family, her life in Somalia has been safe, with the capital considered a green zone for foreigners. But Jessica has no clue that the same Somali pirates who have been plaguing global shipping have recently undergone a transformation. Why steal ships, which increasingly have armed security personnel and other defensive measures, when you can steal people instead? And Westerners fetch the highest prices. Jessica is on her way to staff training at a field office deep in the south of Somalia. She's been putting this off for a long time now. The region is far less safe than the capital, and it's a metaphorical minefield of ever-shifting borders between warring criminal and ideological groups, including the feared Al-Shabaab Islamist terrorists. But she knows that this is exactly where the NGO is needed the most, and where she'll get critical training to help save more children from the perils of landmines. Paul smiles at her reassuringly as the 4x4 bounces along the road. The Danish national quickly became like a second father to her, a natural extension of the love for the children they educated. The two are startled by a sudden blare from behind them. Their driver looks in the rear view and tries to make out the vehicle that is rapidly accelerating on them, but it's difficult through the thick dust being kicked up. Suddenly, the vehicle veers onto the shoulder of the road and speeds past, pulling out in front of them and showering them in dirt and mud. The honking continues as the car hits its brakes. Jessica's stomach drops now. She can clearly see the multiple gun barrels being aimed at them from the broken rear window. The driver comes to a screeching stop. Gunmen jump out of the vehicle and swarm the 4x4, yelling confusing and often contradictory instructions. The doors are opened and the team's security advisor is hauled out, and a gunman climbs into the driver's seat, another in the back. Jessica is in shock, but Paul knows they've been kidnapped. Jessica's mind is racing. She hopes this is a robbery or a carjacking, but her hopes are dashed when the car screeches off. This isn't a simple robbery. Jessica and Paul are hostages now. Her blood runs cold as she looks at the gunman next to her and realizes he is not a man at all, but a child soldier no older than 15. What really unnerves her, though, is his behavior. He is giddy with excitement, mumbling to himself and laughing. Then she spots the telltale stained teeth, a sign of the cot plant leaves that so many chew for the fast high. He demands her bag and starts pulling everything out as the car speeds on, but she's not carrying anything interesting to him, and he simply discards everything into the trunk space behind the bench seat. Then he notices Paul's ballpoint pen clipped to his white button-up shirt and in slurred tones demands it. Paul refuses, defiant in the face of his captors. Paul is determined to not become a victim or show his captors he is weak. But Jessica's mind screams. She wants him to give him the pen, fearful of what the unstable kid could end up doing if not. When he shoves the barrel of his rifle in Paul's face, she closes her eyes reflexively, expecting a sudden bang to ring out. But there's no gunshot. Reluctantly, Paul removes the silver pen and hands it over to the child. After taking it apart and quickly becoming bored, he simply tosses all the pieces out the window. The 4x4 drives for another 15 minutes down the road, and then they're all ordered out. Paul and Jessica are escorted into another vehicle. After driving for several more hours, they swap vehicles again, repeating the feat once more before finally stopping for the night. With guns in their faces, the two are ordered out into the desert and told to walk. After a short while, they're ordered to kneel. Jessica expects a gunshot to the back of the head and squeezes her eyes shut. Instead, to her amazement, she hears a new command: sleep. Emotionally exhausted, Jessica quickly drifts off. Jessica and Paul's odds of survival have increased dramatically, having passed the initial 24-hour mark. However, their fear is that they have been captured by Al-Shabaab or by criminals with plans to sell them. Western hostages are in high demand, with the extremist group paying as much as $1 million for one. They all end up the same, though, executed on video, broadcast over the internet. Both a terror and recruitment tool worth its weight in gold. At the NGO headquarters, it's become apparent that something has gone terribly wrong. But nobody will know of Jessica or Paul's fate for another 24 hours when the captors finally make contact. The NGO demands proof of life before they enter negotiations, and on day 5, the captors arrange for a phone call between Jessica and Paul and the NGO. But negotiations are going south in a hurry. The men are demanding a whopping $45 million. Jessica scoffs at the captors. "I'm not a ship," she says. The NGO has begun the process of notifying the proper authorities, but there's basically nothing the barely functional Somali government can do. The United States and Danish government are alerted, with the US standing up an FBI hostage team. But without a direct line to the hostage takers and zero intelligence on their location, there's little that can be done. But in secret, US drones begin overflights of Somalia, taking off from small US airfields in eastern Africa. The FBI reaches out to the CIA and other intelligence arms of the American government, as well as that of allied partners. Assets in Somalia are few and far between, though, and this group of hostage takers is a relative unknown. Whoever is the mastermind behind the operation, though, is smart. Very smart. The hostages are moved every day, traveling in the car by day and camping out in the desert at night. Days turn into weeks, with both negotiations and a hunt for the perpetrators being fruitless. To protect herself, Jessica claims to have a son, knowing that Somalis hold mothers in high respect. This keeps all of the men away except one, who insists on lying next to her at night. His name is Jabril, an interpreter, and he caresses her as he lays next to her but does nothing more. This is likely due to the daily delivery of khat, which carries the side effect of impotence. As weeks turn into a month, then to 2, necessity drives the hostage takers to give Jessica and Paul more freedom. Jessica learns to cook out in the bush, baking bread in the sand and taking over dinner duty for her captors. It gives her a sense of purpose, and she's grateful for it, but every day she hopes for a rescue that doesn't seem to be coming, and things are rapidly deteriorating. Jessica's developing a urinary tract infection and has been untreated for a thyroid condition since she was taken. The UTI is slowly spreading to her kidneys. In a matter of weeks, it'll be lethal. To make matters worse, negotiations have completely stalled. Her captors are now openly threatening to sell them to Al-Shabaab. What Jessica and her captors don't know is that someone or something is watching. Tens of thousands of feet in the sky, an electronic eye is fixed on the small compound the captors are currently using. The CIA drone is part of a fleet that's been sniffing out every possible trail, from the brief economic emissions of walkie-talkies to the rare cellular phone call. The effort was a matter of finding a needle in a haystack the size of Somalia, but a combination of assets on the ground and persistent drone cover has led to the discovery of the captors. Sitting out in the cool night, they have no idea that the US military is already fully aware of just how many of them there are, their daily routine, and even exactly what kind of weapon each man or child soldier carries. There is nothing the eye in the sky does not know about them. The FBI-led hostage team contacts the White House, alerting President Obama that they have their target. There are 2 options on the table. One is to negotiate directly with the captors one last time via the NGO. The second is the use of military force. It is the official policy of the United States government that it does not negotiate with hostage takers or terrorists. Doing so would only embolden further similar acts in the future. Further negotiations seem fruitless, and the FBI warns that Jessica is in serious risk from her untreated infection. Military action, however, carries its own risk. The group is camped out in southern Somalia, in a region infamous for ever-changing borders between tribal, terror, and criminal groups. Other than the small special forces deployments across Africa, the only major U.S. troop presence should things go wrong for a direct action group is all the way in Djibouti, over 600 miles from the encampment. If the president is authorizing boots on the ground, the men who go in will be completely on their own. Nobody is coming to rescue them. and a single radio call from the captors will bring a horde of their allies swarming down on them. Option 2 has all the hallmarks of the infamous Mogadishu incident, popularized in the movie Black Hawk Down. Except there's no UN base to return to, no UN forces to come to the rescue. President Obama mulls his decision over, but he knows that in truth, there's no choice to be made. Jessica's life is in danger, and soon her and Paul will be moved on to Al-Shabaab, where they will be killed. Watching a live feed of the encampment from a loitering drone, the president nods his approval. The order is relayed directly to U.S. Africa Command within seconds. At the U.S. base in Djibouti, a force made up of Navy SEALs, U.S. Air Force Special Operations pilots and pararescue men, and MARSOC specialists is assembled. The Joint Task Force has already been briefed and prepared. A C-130 Hercules with engines idling has been waiting for the order to go. 4 Black Hawk helicopters and a second C-130 loaded with fuel bladders begin to spin up. The Black Hawks are the first to lift off, wheeling out to sea in order to throw off any observer that the captors might have installed near the base. An hour later, the second C-130 takes off and rendezvous with the slower-flying Black Hawks, refueling them for the long trip to the target site. Back at Djibouti, the C-17 loaded with the rescue party takes off, ambling out to sea and then correcting course towards the heart of Somalia once out of the sight of ground observers. The men inside prepare for one of the most hazardous actions demanded of special forces anywhere in the world: a jump in the dead of night at extreme altitude. The C-17 with the rescue force overtakes the slower support element and reaches the drop site well before them. The bay door of the cargo aircraft opens as the soldiers shuffle to the end of the ramp. They're breathing oxygen masks because there's barely any air up here. They're so high that even the C-17's powerful engines are struggling to stay lit, but any lower and they'd be risking giving away their presence with the telltale sound of engine noise. But as the men prepare to jump, there's a complication. Local winds high up in the atmosphere have reached gale force, making any jump unsafe. Just a few thousand feet below them, an atmospheric river fueled by residual desert heat is roaring toward the ocean. The buffeting force is enough to tear oxygen masks off and shred parachutes. The mission seems doomed. The SEALs are made aware of the predicament. They choose to jump anyway. Freezing wind whipping at the men over 45 miles an hour. One by one, they jump out of the back of the aircraft and into a black void. Once they hit the river of wind in the sky, they're jerked violently, but the men keep their limbs tight against their bodies as they plummet through the current. An extended arm or leg would be immediately broken. The wind threatens to tear the very equipment the men need to survive the fall from their bodies. Each SEAL is falling in a steep dive to punch through the atmospheric current, rapidly pushing past 120 miles per hour and eating up precious elevation they need to maneuver back on target. If they fail to course correct, they'll land dozens of miles off course. But one by one, the SEALs punch through the sky river and into the calmer skies below, flattening their bodies to slow their fall. There are no city lights, no street lights, nothing. Just black desert below and black sky above. The fall is disorienting, impossible to even know how far you've fallen or how close to the ground you are. But for the team of 24 SEALs picked from the same elite unit that eliminated Osama bin Laden, this is just another day on the job. Digital readouts tell each man their current elevation, while GPS instructs them on how to adjust their plummet through the sky. They use their bodies as rudders, aiming themselves to the designated drop site, several kilometers away from the encampment and safely out of the sight of the captors. They don't pull their chutes until the last possible moment in order to avoid giving themselves away. A ground observer might notice the pattern of distant stars being blacked out by parachutes if they pull them too high up. The men land slightly off course, the high winds blowing some astray. A few of them are dragged for hundreds of feet across the desert by their parachutes, which they desperately try to separate from. In short order, though, the SEALs have formed into a defensive perimeter, having survived one of the most high-risk skydives in history. Striking up a marching order, they begin to move on the camp, guided by the U.S. Air Force's unblinking eye in the sky above. Loaded with a thermal camera and other classified sensors, there is little the drone can't see in the compound. The SEALs even have a live picture broadcast directly to them, giving them the exact knowledge of each captor's location, and more importantly, the location of the hostages. But there is another problem. A solar storm is currently striking the upper atmosphere, electromagnetic energy redirected around the plane by its magnetic shield. The disturbance is enough to cause communication blackouts, leaving the SEALs completely alone in the dark for long stretches of time. For a SEAL, the only easy day was yesterday, so the men march on, ready to wage war without the aid of radios or electronics if required. Only the mission matters, only the saving of innocent lives. It's several miles to the compound and the men move silently through the black night. As the wind shifts, so does the double column of soldiers, making sure that they are never upwind from the camp. The elite team of soldiers moves like an experienced predator, giving their prey no chance to detect it by sight, sound, or even smell. Inside the compound, one guard watching over Jessica and Paul shifts nervously. He thought that he heard something, a slight rustle somewhere in the desert past the boundaries of the camp. Unlike his comrades, he hasn't consumed his evening's delivery of khat. While it acts like an amphetamine and promotes wakefulness, it also dulls the senses. The guard tells Jessica to sit still, reaching for his rifle as he steps out into the night. He can't hear anything, but a hidden sixth sense, some primordial leftover from man's time in the dawn of history, warns him of danger. He can't see it, he can't hear it, but he knows there is a predator in the night. Invisible to the guard is a single laser beam fixed on him by the lead SEAL. As it appears, other laser beams fire up on the kidnappers across the compound. The lasers are completely invisible to anything but night vision. The guard shouts an alarm only for it to die in his throat as a 3-round burst of rifle fire shreds into his chest. The man gasps and falls over in view of Jessica. Instinctively, she wraps herself in a blanket, trying to make herself as small as possible, just as more rifle fire sounds out. The dull staccato bursts of SEAL fire, partly silenced and muzzle flash greatly reduced by silencers, sounds out in stark contrast to the wild rifle fire of AK-47s that is aimed at nothing. 2 heavy machine guns fire off at the SEALs, but are silenced just as quickly by 2 snipers at the assault element's flanks. Guards are running in a panic now, and the first SEAL has reached the shack holding Jessica and Paul. He throws himself on Jessica, shielding her with his body. She's in a panic and slightly delirious, taking a few moments before realizing that the man on top of her is speaking perfect English. "Jessica, stay down. I'm an American. We're here to rescue you." 2 more SEALs throw themselves on top of Jessica and Paul, shielding them from any rifle fire or grenades. But outside, in the compound, the rest of the assault force is making short work of the guards, eliminating them with pinpoint rifle fire. Jessica soon finds herself being picked up and hoisted onto the shoulders of a SEAL, who starts sprinting out of the camp. 2 SEALs follow to provide security, as Paul, who is capable of running on his own, follows another 3 SEALs. Back at the camp, there's the sound of an explosion as the captors' cache of weapons and grenades is destroyed. The lead SEAL runs into the dark until he can't run anymore, and then he stops to lower Jessica down to the ground as gently as he can. 2 figures rush out of the darkness at her, and she recoils in terror, but these 2 are Americans, Air Force pararescue men who have joined the SEALs so they could provide life-saving care to Jessica and Paul. Inserting an IV into their arms, Jessica gets a round of antibiotics as initial treatment for her life-threatening infection. Leaning on one of the men, the SEALs implore her to begin moving into the desert. They have a short hike to get to the landing zone. Radio comms are sporadic and the news is not good. The attack has set off a beehive of activity and enemy reinforcements are on their way. Someone must have gotten off a radio call. The SEALs form a human shield around the hostages as they move, protecting them with their own bodies from any unseen attackers. As they arrive at the landing zone, the SEALs set up a defensive perimeter with the pararescuemen tending to Paul and Jessica. Jessica reaches out to the SEAL who rescued her in fear as he moves away to take up position on the perimeter. What if more come? Her face is pale, fear and exhaustion strewn on her face after months of captivity. The SEAL growls silently before giving Jessica a reassuring squeeze on her arm. "Ma'am, we're U.S. Navy SEALs, and we will kill anyone who tries to hurt you." Jessica, Paul, and the rescue force would be exfiltrated without incident, flown the hundreds of miles to Djibouti, where they would be medically treated and Paul repatriated. The Danish government would send its thanks to the U.S. government and the men and women of the United States military and intelligence services who facilitated their citizens' rescue. No further Americans have been kidnapped in Somalia. If you thought the Navy SEALs' takedown of Somali pirates was wild, just wait until you see the crazy rescue mission of hijacked airplane, Operation Entebbe, or click on this video instead.